Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hello, and welcome to 4Kids Flashback. Hi, I'm Tara Sands, joined by
Steve Yurko.
Yurko. Did you have any? I can't think of any clever nicknames with the name Yurko. Did you have any funny nicknames growing up, or were kids ever clever about the Yurko? No. Like Yurko, Myko. I don't know. There's nothing like.
No, yeah, it's funny. Like I do have a friend of mine who said like, "Oh, your name is so punnable," and I can't think of anything.
I don't think it is.
Probably.
Sure. Oh, like Yurko, Jerko.
I
Like if I was a mean kid, I guess. Like Yurko, Jerko.
Maybe that one was
Yurko.
so easy. I don't know. I never heard that one. I mean, I was growing up in the early '90s, so some people I remember when I was very young, people were like Steve Urkel, and I'm like, no,
that I would have thought of,
you
or
idiot.
And especially because we were still allowed to bully back then. That's when it was still permissible.
Oh yeah,
to bully.
Yeah, it was encouraged. Yeah,
it was back then. Now we're not allowed.
Yeah, I wore it as a badge of honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, but you were a big kid. Like, I would have guessed since you were so tall that people wouldn't mess with you. Is that not so?
No, quite the opposite. I think,
really?
being big. Oh, it's like, if they find out like you're nice, that's yeah. When you're a big nice guy, that's when.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's a I think it's a toxic masculinity kind of thing too, especially, boys growing up. It's just like, if there's other big guys, who are like, when it's almost like beta fish. You put like,
you
two
can't
big
have
guys
two
come across each
together.
other, there's sizing up.
Yeah.
And then when it's me, when I don't care, and then it's just like,
right, because you weren't
like
looking
chum
for a
in
fight.
the water.
Yeah.
No,
well,
I
couldn't beat up anybody. Yeah, you just wanted to. Aw, little Steve. We're gonna have to find a picture of young Steve and post it on the account. I guess we should stop talking about your childhood. You can lay down on the couch later, and I can analyze you if you want. But we should talk about Jordan Podos.
Maybe that'll be bonus content.
Yes, we can also ask Jordan Podos about his childhood and if he was the bully or the bullier. No, the bullier or the bully. That doesn't work.
He has no idea what he's
or the
signed up
bullied.
for.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So, Jordan was a producer and editor at 4Kids. And we also heard we heard from Crystal when we interviewed her that he handled the credits for the show. So I have some questions about that. And he handled some promos too. And I'm hoping he has some fun promo stories for us.
For sure, yeah. It'll be a good time today.
Yeah,
good vibes.
And yeah, I'm looking at his good vibes. Yeah, we'll go for some good vibes. He worked on so many shows, like some of the later shows that we haven't gotten into too much, like G.I. Joe and Winx Club and shows like that. So hopefully we'll get into some of the later projects that 4Kids was working on.
People are tired of us just talking about Pokémon and One Piece.
Yeah.
For the millionth time.
Yes, we're expanding our horizons.
It's what we know.
But we're gonna expand. I feel like I have a blind spot because again, I moved in 2005, so the shows going on after that, I am not able to talk about as much. So hopefully, we'll get some people who can. And so before we get to Jordan's interview, if you are listening to this now but you hate commercials, what should they do?
Well, if you go over to our Patreon, that's patreon.com/4kidsflashback with the number 4. You throw us a little bit of money. You could listen to these episodes ad-free and a week early.
Bonus content. We're working on that. Yeah. And if you like ads, then you can listen on any platform. Just head to 4kidsflashback.com. That's the number 4. You can find links to all that fun stuff, plus a link to shop for merch from the show with Steve's cool logo. And if you're feeling super generous, you can write us a review or just leave 5 stars. And if you have, you can follow us on social media, all the obvious places at 4Kids Flashback. And now, the interview. Hello and welcome to our interview with Jordan Podos. He edited according to his LinkedIn profile, over 300 hours of long form television for 4Kids, including Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Cubics, Common Riders, I don't remember that show. Ultimate Muscle, G.I. Joe, Sonic, Funky Cops. We love Funky Cops here. Tom and Friends, Winx Club, and Kirby. He also worked on some promotional pieces. You directed the voiceover sessions, supervised audio mixes. Jordan, what didn't you do at 4Kids?
Stay there too long.
You were there from, I believe, 2001 to 2007. Is that
So
correct?
yes, I was staff with them from 2001 to 2007, and then I left strictly to go freelance. But what I did, I would say from about 2007 through 20 the early 2010s potentially, I was freelancing with them. So they were just one of my freelance clients where I would go in, more as a hired gun on certain projects or for X amount of days as opposed to being their staff. But I was in and out just from a staff capacity at 2007.
Got it. And I guess we should start from the beginning. When did your interest in working in entertainment start? Did you study it? Or was this something you learned on the job?
No, honestly, my interest in entertainment started when I was in high school. At the time, my uncle had a post-production studio in New York City. So I used to be able to go in and watch the sessions there. And at the time, he had some very high-profile projects. So his studio worked, if you can remember, the NBA I Love This Game promotions. It was a tremendous amount of things to try and reinvigorate people with the NBA. And so they were just working on this really cool content. And I loved the idea of getting involved in something where I, very much was part of the process of crafting, what the audience would see. So that's what piqued my interest. And then, I went to school to be in media. And at school, I was kind of introduced to a lot of different aspects of things. And I just felt that I kind of gravitated towards editing. I was introduced to animation, to audio post-production. I also looked at a little multimedia stuff. But for whatever reason, one reason or another, I gravitated towards editing, and that's been the basis of everything I've done since then.
So it was a very young staff at 4Kids. Was this your first real job at that office?
No, so I actually graduated college when I was 19 years old. So I had a couple of jobs prior to this place. But this was my first editing position. I was actually hired as an assistant editor, and I wound up getting promoted 2 or 3 months after starting, simply because that's the need they needed filled. And I happened to be a body who was there, and I was good at, the pressing the buttons and whatnot. So they gave me that shot, and then I kind of ran with it.
So in 2001, they were already doing Pokemon. So did you know, you must have heard of Pokemon by that point, I'm assuming, and known kind of what this company was all about? Or was this all foreign to you when you went to your interview?
Only when I started doing a little bit of research did I know what I was walking into, but it was very much, I happened to be friendly with the guy who at the time was supplying them with all of their post-production machinery. He was their Avid rep. So I knew this guy. He mentioned that he had a client that had an opening, and I said, I just happened to be looking for something. So it was very much the good timing, very serendipitous that I knew the guy, and he plugged me in. And then once he mentioned who they were, I started doing a little research. I got excited with Pokemon. And then once I saw really what goes into it, I was pretty excited. Yeah.
So at that point, I guess if you were interviewing there, your job would have been working on Pokemon, maybe Tama and Friends. This is early years. So what was going on at the company around this time?
So around that time, you hit the nail right on the head. Pokemon was in full swing. They were working on Cubics, and they were working on Tama and Friends. And they were just at the very beginning stages of kind of planning out Yu-Gi-Oh! So I started as a nighttime assistant editor, where a lot of my responsibilities was either loading the projects in, making sure that the rotoscoping and the various graphic things were incorporated the right way, outputting, things like that, did not necessarily need to happen during, normal business hours, just because at the time they were a much smaller shop. They only had 2 editing machines. So it was a little bit different. And then as I started to grow, that's when I was able to move from, nighttime assistant editor to being there during the day, and then taking that next step to be an editor on the series for them.
Someone told us that at night there were other people working and would rent out those studio spaces, like musicians. And did you see anything crazy while you were there?
Well, not necessarily crazy, but it was you never quite knew who to expect in the building, and not that there was ever anybody, that I could recall, a particularly famous person or anything, but there were people in and out, essentially all hours of the day and night. So that I do remember.
Yeah, God, I didn't realize what was going on after hours there. There was like Club 4Kids going on after everyone.
Well, anything they could do to monetize the space, right?
Serious. Well, they put, we've talked about with some people like how much they sank a lot of money into all these studios, to be able to be a fully functioning production facility. So it makes sense that they wanted to have them always be busy.
Yep.
So okay, so when you're doing some of this stuff at night, and then you graduate to a daytime employee. How did your job change then?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the long and short of it was, as I was working in the evenings, I still got to interact with all the folks. So they saw that I was, competent, and I was a relatively nice guy to work with. So that helped. And then on the flip side, they happened to have an editor they were working with at the very beginning of the Yu-Gi-Oh series, and it just wasn't quite working out. So he was leaving. And again, they were essentially looking for somebody, and I said, I'd like a shot, and they gave me that shot, if you will, and then I kind of took the ball and ran with it. And it was certainly, that first year that first season of Yu-Gi-Oh was still everybody was very hands-on. Certainly when you're launching a series you want to be, but it was also the idea of, I'm this young kid who's now piloting this series in the editing chair. So there was a little bit of that going on too. But, I was able to run with that for the rest of the run of the series. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty intense, being young and having that responsibility. And I guess you were probably working with, that's the season that John Kalish was producing. Is that correct?
So essentially all the seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Lloyd Goldfine was like the producer, or the senior
Lloyd,
producer.
I'm sorry. I meant to say Lloyd.
Yep.
I got my names confused. My bad.
The fact that you know these names already says something, so don't even sweat it.
Oh my gosh. No, so I know we just spoke to someone who replaced Lloyd for season 2 through 5. So I'm
Oh, you spoke with Mike.
We spoke with Mike, who's I mean, such a great guy, and it is, I have to say, I'm sad I didn't know the staff more back in the day, because I was, running in and out just doing my part. I knew the actors, I knew some of the directors, but I was like, what a great group of people this was. And like a young staff of people have gone on to do such incredible things, and I wish I had more time to get to know everyone working there. So this is kind of a nice little bonus of doing the podcast.
It honestly happened to be a lot of fun, because you just happen to make friends, and everybody who you were working with was very easy to get along with. And everybody essentially understood that, as, crazy as it would get sometimes, we were still ultimately making cartoons, and it kind of helped, keep it even keeled, even in the busy times or up against a deadline or whatever it is.
Yeah, that was my next question. How crazy were the deadlines? Since you've had all this experience since then, and you see how other places work, were those just insane, intense deadlines, or was it pretty status quo?
It's something that honestly I never felt weighing on us so much. That I'd have to say that the showrunners and the producers on the show really had a pretty good handle on how long everything should take. And though some of the creative and technical staff were on the younger side, I mean, some of these folks were definitely seasoned, so they came in with a good deal of production experience, so that they were able to plan out the schedule so that it was moving at a good clip, but it was also a very manageable clip. And there were certainly, every once in a while, you got thrown a curveball, or the network required a change that you weren't anticipating, so that would, cause some delays or some busy times. But it was, for the most part, specifically, at least Yu-Gi-Oh!, most of the series I were involved with, the schedules were manageable. When 4Kids started to expand beyond that, and they started to bring in like the on-air promos when they had these time blocks, those schedules were very hard to keep up with. And I like almost wound up in the hospital after the first, weekend that
Oh,
the network aired. There was like so crazy.
oh, oh my God. Yeah, see, that's what I was thinking. Like, there was a point when it was just insane, like how fast things had to be produced. I remember us cranking it out. That leads me to another question. Steve will be able to help me out with this more because there were so many edits and changes, and there were so many stages of approval. As an editor, how did all that affect your work? Were you making the edits before we dubbed them? Were you, because again, for censorship issues and things like that?
Sure. Well, typically, I would be putting together the initial rough cut, and that's essentially taking this Japanese show that comes in at 21 minutes approximately, and I would put it together in a way that made sense to me. Like the Japanese shows only have a single commercial act break. Our shows would have three commercial act breaks. So I would have to sit there, watch through, the 20 minutes and try and decide where the dramatic moments were to create these act breaks. So ultimately, I would do that in an initial pass, and I would also either on my own or with a producer have the notes from the network, because the network would always pre-screen the Japanese masters, so they might know,
Oh,
here is a handgun that needs to be removed, or whatever story elements that just doesn't jive with what they're trying to have out there. So we would know that going into rough cut, and then essentially you go through the process where the rough cut is then shared with the creatives. If they have any notes, once they start going into scripting, you go back in, you make some of these small adjustments. After the record is done, honestly, we always tried to be in a place where there wouldn't be much changes, because then it starts happening on a larger scale. It's not just an edit happening within editorial, but then it also affects what's happening with sound design and the other various things. So we would
right.
always try to get the majority, if not all of the edits done before you guys came in and started, recording and doing anything of the audio related.
Yeah, and I wonder if hearing that makes a lot of sense too, because I wonder if in certain circumstances, uh, you almost overcorrect, like you over censor just because we don't want any issues with any of this. Like, let's take out anything that might be objectionable because if this comes back with changes from the network, we're screwed. This messes up our whole timeline. Do you feel like sometimes it was like oversensitive to all that stuff, or was it pretty standard?
No, honestly, it was a lot easier prior to 4Kids owning the airtime. So when it was Yu-Gi-Oh! Or some of these other shows that were specifically going through like Warner Brothers or CW, it was those things were pretty much addressed from the beginning. And there were certain things that we would just know moving forward. This character needs to have, something rotoscoped, or whatever it
Less
is. So
cleavage. Yeah.
something along those
Yeah.
lines. So we were kind of able to prepare for that. Things got a little bit more hectic once it was kind of all under our roof, because then it was like a little bit easier for people to change things beyond the point that they should have. And
Oh,
that's when problems potentially arose. But I mean, it's we got to the point
wait a
where
second. Are you the one that came up with the technique for editing stuff that okay, Steve, you're going to have to help me here.
Sure.
I think they said it was Jordan's technique of making edits and somehow like changing mouth flap.
I
Do you
did
know what I'm
certainly do
talking
that.
about?
Oh my goodness.
You
So
were
I mean,
called out for this. Jordan, someone was not happy. Now I'm going to forget which interview, but they said Jordan came up with this really cool thing that worked, but then caused a lot of extra work for us.
well, I mean, ultimately, I typically with Japanese animation, there are only three mouth positions when any character is speaking, as long as their head is not moving. So, typically, if a person's speaking and their head's not moving, it's either closed, medium, or open. So I got really adept at simply putting on, the waveform on my timeline and listening to what was being said and repeating frames, because that's essentially all that animation is at this Japanese animation. The amount of frames that are repeated to get you to 1 second and 5 seconds and beyond, is quite immense. So using that same technique, you're able to use 3 frames and create a 5 second, lip flap of somebody. It's something that I really tried to avoid doing, because then it's really something that if you're going to get lost in the weeds, you could spend, 2 or 3 days lip flapping an entire episode. But there were certainly a few instances where, for one reason or another, either the animation was not long enough to accommodate what was written, or something along those lines, where they, said, do me a favor, and I'd, I'd repeat my frames as many times as necessary.
Just to clarify, so for like, you would say you were in there combing through all these episodes of Japanese television before even the scripts were written. So it was more like go through every episode and be like, all right, here's what we can't use, or just like, here's what we got to make sure we rotoscope over. And then it's, you hand it over to the writers like, all right, adapt this. Is that correct?
Well, I mean,
Okay.
again, in working in conjunction with either Lloyd or Mike Pecorello at the time, we would go through and do that. I mean, certainly the things that would need to be rotoscoped, that's not affecting the edit overall. That starts to involve graphics and things like that, but that's not necessarily going to be removing or replacing things, or I guess replacing with rotoscope. But the things that required edits, those are all pre-screened again by the network. So if we're going to sit down and do rough cut of episode 320, you're going to have your sheet from this time code to this time code, remove. And occasionally it creates continuity issues. So you do occasionally need to do further editing from there to either, fix something because something integral was removed, or because you remove something, it just makes sense to remove this other 2 things just to have a more seamless story. So those are things that we work on. But yes, that all definitely happened before it went out to any writers or anything like that.
How many episodes ahead did you get to see? Like, we've heard kind of varying things depending on the show, but for Yu-Gi-Oh, did you get a bunch of episodes at once, or did they trickle in?
For all of the seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh that I worked on, and I would probably say the same for Yu-Gi-Oh GX and a handful of these other things, it would be a situation where we honestly had all of the episodes in. We wouldn't, from all of the episodes from either Japan or Korea or wherever they were coming in, we would have the entire season's worth. Ultimately, we wouldn't necessarily reformat the entire season before sending out to writers, just again based on the schedule. But we typically had everything, and then ultimately, as the writers are doing stuff, there were other things that needed to be done to prepare for the season to, wind up going on the next steps. So all of the main titles that were edited for Yu-Gi-Oh, and for, I'd say, every series, honestly, that I worked on at 4Kids, there was not any original animation that was created specifically for the main title. So it was typically using footage from the episodes. So it was very much a situation where you would have to screen all 52 episodes or whatever it is to get, your 10 minutes of fantastic selects that you're going to make a 1-minute main title out of. So it really was, looking through everything and having an eye on, oh, this happens to be the story arc, so I need to feature this monster or this character in the main title, and keeping things like that in mind.
So maybe this is a silly question, but was that ever kept from the Japanese? Like, because they had already done all that. Like, did they have a main title?
They did.
Edited together?
So Japan always supplied a main title in their credit bed. Honestly, it was very much a situation where, for one reason or another, I don't know if it's just the style they used, it happened to feature a lot of like Japanese like kanji and things like that, so we couldn't necessarily use a lot of their things. But it was always a good source of like special shots that people would not have recognized from the episode. So I would say, depending on the season, you might have 20 to 30 seconds of what would be considered new animation, because it would come from these Japanese main titles or other content that they provided us, but we were never able to fully utilize one of their edits. So it was always being incorporated into something new that we were doing.
the kanji, would that mean like these openings endings came with the credits in them that you couldn't remove, or like
Well,
the
sometimes, and it's
karaoke
amazing. You would
lyrics? Yeah.
think they would supply us clean footage to work with. I mean,
Right.
sometimes it still had the Japanese text. Other
Mm.
times it was just part of, like, stylistically, you might see a sign in the background, but just based on the way the animation was working, it just wasn't worth the effort to try and remove and whatnot. So they were just, like some of those things. And honestly, they what I noticed is like the aesthetic is a little different. So some of the things from their main title simply wouldn't appeal to like the audience the way we were presenting things.
Your name came up during another interview,
Oh,
Jordan, with Crystal, who said that when she got married, you were not happy because her name became very long and was not easy to put in the credits.
What?
So I didn't know you were working on the credits. So that you're the first person we've spoken to who has had anything to do with that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process, possibly why something people are confused about with 4Kids is that they use the same credits for every episode. So like if a voice director did 2 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh that season, like because someone wasn't available, they were listed on every single episode. Was that just to save time and money? How did that all work?
I'm not sure if that's true, but I've seen some of these credits recently, and there are changes.
I think now, I think they are different now, for sure. Yeah.
I honestly can't tell you why they did that. Changing the credits once they were created is a 5 to 10 minute fix, so I can't imagine that it was a time thing. Maybe it was just a way of making sure that the checkbox was marked at the beginning of the season and not having to worry about that one thing for the rest. But I don't recall it being a large issue.
That's interesting. Yeah, because like the actors, like we're not credited by character name. It's just like a list of actors. So like I would be if I didn't work on that episode. So that's really, I wonder who was making that call then, because it seemed like right, Steve, am I wrong about that? Like it seemed like a pretty universal thing throughout those early shows that there were just the same credits. But so changing Crystal's name was just kind of a one-time.
I guess she just she had it out. I don't know. I can tell you though that we would change the writers' names, and I don't know if that's more because of residuals or anything along those lines. I don't have any idea about how that worked, but I know that there were a few times that would come up. But I think for the actors, it was just very much let's get the whole list there and make sure it's just carried across so all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't know who we played. It's gotten really crazy because we have no idea who we played on all these shows. And then, like, we'll get, emails or whatever from fans saying, did you do this? I'm like, I have no idea. There were 17,000 things going on.
Right.
No one kept notes. Nobody, it was so haphazard back then. And we had no idea we'd be talking about this 25 years later.
Neither did we.
So, yeah, right? Like, it's bizarre. So I know you were editing tons of stuff. Like you seems like most people we've spoken to like had one show they were assigned to. You seem to have kind of run the gamut and been kind of on a lot of different shows at once. Or was that just once in a while you were jumping on those other projects?
Well, it got to the point where I remember the schedule would very much be broken down. You're going to have X amount of hours today on show A. You're going to have X amount of hours on a different show, what have you. And that was very much on a weekly basis. I knew I was going to arrive and work from 10 to 6 every day, but I did not know that I was necessarily going to work on Yu-Gi-Oh! Or what have you. Well, actually, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was pretty much a full-time thing when that was happening, because at the time, there was just simply not as much happening. And they were, just trying to churn these episodes out. There was a period of time where I'd say I was working on between 2 and 4 shows at a time, but they were slightly less demanding shows that didn't have as much, let's say, graphics involved, which then led to more editorial and things like that. They were just more straight adaptations where there was not as many edits, and so some of those stages were a lot faster. And then I think it's also a situation, honestly, where they were really able to lean on me a little bit because I got incredibly efficient at doing this stuff. It was a situation where, let's say we were conforming a show and all the steps were done prior to that. I could conform a show in probably about 15 minutes, where it might take some of the other folks on the team, an hour or 2 hours. So like the fact that I was able to turn this stuff around, because it's not an exaggeration, the 300 hours of content that I've edited, after the first 100 hours or so, you start to really, pick up the pace. And I was able to really turn things around relatively quickly.
Was there a show that was more fun or interesting to work on than another? Was there something about certain shows that made them more interesting to you?
There were some shows that were fun to work on because the content was fun.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned Funky Cops earlier. Like, that was just a fun, funny show to watch. So that was okay. Um, there were some aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! GX that were very rewarding, and there were some aspects of those same properties that were maddening. You have to keep in mind that every single card that you see on those
Yeah.
shows were changed. So yes, that was certainly a lot of work on the graphic side, but that required us to, prepare our timelines in a certain way and send the footage and then get the shots back and drop them in. And it was just an incredibly tedious process. And regardless of how fast I got, it was just, it was very hamster wheel like actions, daily or weekly. So there were certainly aspects of it that was difficult to get through, not because the work itself was hard, just because it was so boring, some of these
Yeah.
aspects of the project that but it was interesting. And we also got to work on some series. When Yu-Gi-Oh came out, high definition did not exist. So most of the series that I worked on at 4Kids was standard definition, but we started to work with a couple of high definition shows at the beginning of high definition. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there, and it was very nice to have some of the folks on the team who were at the time a little bit more technically savvy than I was, so that I could pick up some of those things from them. And it was a very nice way for me to like dip my toes into high definition, because we were all doing it at the same time. So that there were like Viva Pinata and a couple of those series that started working in HD, that they provided their own challenges, but it was also like my first exposure. It was pretty cool to be able to do it with this team of people who I knew,
Yeah,
could help
since
me
we're
out if I
talking
needed
about
it.
the tech stuff, for the tech geeks out there, 2001 to 2007 is a time when sort of, I would, and correct me if I'm wrong, your job must have changed a lot because you were not working off of VHS tapes and running around to different places. Like at the beginning, we were hearing there's messengers, like with tapes converting things, and then it all moved in house, and there was just computers could do a lot more, and you could burn stuff onto a disk. Like, did your job just change because of the tech that was available?
I think, again, the biggest change that I saw with the tech really was when HD came out. I mean, we were still, up until when I stopped working at 4Kids, even freelance around, again, the early 2010s, we were still tied to tape machines. The machines were
Oh,
in-house, so you didn't have to run very far, but it was still very much, that's how we were getting our media, was either on tape. Those last couple of series that I worked on, we would be messengered a hard drive, so that then we were going to take media from their hard drive, place it on our Unity storage, and be able to work with it locally. But it's we saw the early changes in Avid. I mean, we're talking a lot of iterations to start preparing for HD, and just the extra computing power. There were things that I couldn't do at the beginning that the computers kind of caught up with. But I mean, it's funny to think about it now, because we are light years beyond where we were when I left 4Kids, and we're only, a decade beyond that. So it's
that
very
we can
interesting to
do
think
all
about
this
like
from
that.
home now. Yeah, you would never even have to go into the office now.
That's that's it's both a
Yeah.
blessing and a curse.
So before I want to get into what you're doing today, because it's so interesting to me, but I want to talk a little bit about the promo pieces you worked on, because 4Kids has some infamous promo stuff that went out, like the singing of the national anthem and all kinds of crazy tie-ins with fast food places and all that stuff. What were you involved in when it came to the promos?
So I got involved with promos at 4Kids when they were just overflowing with work. Initially, there were two editors that were brought on specifically to handle the promos, and at the time, I was still mainly doing series. Then, towards the end of my staff time at 4Kids, they had me transitioning to doing part-time promos and still handling a few series. So again, one of those I didn't exactly know what I was going to work on, and I got put where I needed to go. So what happened was, while I was staff, I started editing, a series of promos. I remember some things that stood out. They had a Guinness World Record promo they did where a guy blew like the most ham puppet balloons in an hour and silly things like that. So we had to do some fun stuff with footage. One of the singing of the national anthem, I had to do my silly lip flap trick to make all the characters' faces say and sing the national anthem and do
Oh,
things like
you know what? I
that.
was wondering how that got made because I was like, God, that's a lot of footage to sort through. But when they had your special secret Jordan trick, uh, you
That's right.
the patented, yeah, okay, that makes more sense now.
And then
Well,
speaking to
this,
the some of the other stuff that I mentioned that I did specifically at 4Kids, I started to get to produce and edit my own promos where I would go and I would script the spots and then I would edit the spots. And then that's when I was getting involved in the voiceover direction or the mix sessions and whatnot. So I was really wearing a lot of hats. And I did that a little bit when I was like right before I left the company. And then when I came back in, if I was being brought in to do promos, it was very much a situation like that. Come in and produce and edit spots for us. And I was still doing it all in-house there. But it was like it was a lot of fun to be involved in that aspect of handling everything and really taking ownership. Um, I I learned one of my most important lessons ever working on Yu-Gi-Oh! 4Kids. It was the second season of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they were going to allow me, the new editor, to edit the main title, which at the time it was a pretty big deal. You're going to edit the main title,
yeah.
there was a lot of cooks in that particular kitchen. And I remember, I was given the song and all the episodes go to town. They gave me, a handful of days to work on the edit. And I went back and I sat down with the producer and I shared my edit. And we were going through and he was giving me notes on, I don't like this shot, whatnot. And there was one moment where I said, I really want to fight for this aspect of the edit I did. I really think it looks cool and it works well. And he looks at me as plain as day and he's like, yeah, I hear you, but we're still going to change it. And it was very much the idea of, as the editor, you were always there to service the client being the producer in this particular instance. So that idyllic thought that I had in high school and college that I'm going to directly influence what is going to be seen is only partially true. And that kind of really pulled back the curtain on it. Like, you could put your best foot
Right.
forward, but it's still working towards somebody else's ultimate goal. And when I was producing and editing the promos, it removed some of that. I mean, there was still certainly a layer of approvals and whatnot, but I was able to be a little bit more in charge, if you will, of
Yeah.
what will be presented and then going from there, as opposed to everything being dictated.
But I would guess, and I'm just guessing, that the opposite probably did happen sometimes where you put something together and maybe it wasn't verbalized, but the producer thought, oh, he just really fixed that moment, or what a cool idea he just had. So maybe you just weren't getting to hear
You
that,
don't
the
get the
flip side
kudos
of
quite
it.
as much as you get
Yeah.
the slap on the
Well,
hands, but certainly.
because I feel like in recent years, there's been more attention paid to, like, oh, God, that movie was made in the editing room. Or editors, I think, are starting to get a lot more of the credit that they deserve. Is that accurate? I mean, do you hear that? Or,
Well, and honestly, on the content that I'm currently working on, it still is very much a servicing the client type of situation or servicing the
hmm
situation. There have been a handful of things where, you kind of get the credits that you deserve, if you will, but it's mostly, behind the scenes, unsung type of position.
Fair enough. So how did you make the decision to end your time at 4Kids? Was it strictly because you wanted to work freelance and be your own boss after working for a pretty big company at that point?
Well, for better or for worse, 4Kids was an island unto itself. So it was very much a unique business model in the world of video production. So while I was able to get my chops at 4Kids and really get my skills up and, be able to go and sell myself as a very, fast editor and be able to go sell myself as a producer and those various aspects of things, it was very much a necessary step in my career. On the flip side of it, I was there for 6 years and it didn't allow me to get out there and build the relationships and connections that have, served me ever since. And
right.
So I felt a little stifled. And what I noticed was happening, even as I started going back and looking for work, towards the end of my time at 4Kids, the media landscape and the production world and post-production world is very siloed. So because I was working at 4Kids under this very particular set of, parameters, most of the work was being done, it was not necessarily applicable to a lot of the work that was being done outside of this particular business model. So it was very much a situation where, regardless of the 6 years and all the work that I'd done, I very much had to go back out and prove myself from the beginning. And so I started seeing that writing on the wall. And what I started to do towards the end of my time at 4Kids was try and start taking on projects to do in the evening, or, if I wound up taking a few days off, to then freelance with somebody else to just try and build these relationships. And for better or for worse, I was offered a 1 month long freelance gig, and I put in my 2 weeks notice at 4Kids to go take this 1 month gig. And it just felt like the right time. I'm not exactly sure if it was the right time, and that's something I've questioned to this day. But it was that was what got me going, was the fact that I was then able to go into a handful of post-production shops, mainly promo shops around New York, and sell myself, and they were interested in what I was selling. So I was able to go and, have these relationships. And that's really what kind of gave me the push to leave 4Kids, excuse me, in a staff capacity. And then it was also because it was such a small island, like I had all these really fantastic relationships that, if things got slow or if they had overflow or whatever, it was very organic to say, like, hey guys, if you still need my help, or if whatever, and then we were able to keep that relationship going, which was really pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot about you leaving on good terms, that they were still hiring you to do work, which is nice.
Yeah, that's another lesson I learned a long time ago in my career.
You didn't slam down your resignation notice. Yeah.
That's right.
Although that would have been a funny scene, I suppose. So we should talk about the company you started after that. Is that when C-Spot Cut started, or was that much later?
C-Spot Cut started about 5 years later. So I left 4Kids in 2007, and from 2007 through 2012, I was just strictly a freelancer, gun for hire. I would go again to different post shops. I wound up working with a handful of different networks in-house in their promo departments as necessary. And by 2012, I started to have a pretty good feel of what was going on out there. And there was a company in particular that started to have a different business model than the traditional post house. I got very accustomed to the traditional post house, where it was incredibly expensive for the clients to come sit with the editors. You were ordering sushi for lunch. You were having cocktails at 5 o'clock. And while it was a lot of fun, it clearly wasn't sustainable. So there was a client who I was working with at the time that essentially removed that experience, where it was no longer a supervised session. So they brought all their talent in, and they had a handful of editing rooms and their writers and their all of their production staff, but there were no clients. It was very much at the beginning of like the age where you could share links, and links were starting to be sent, and the clients were not coming any longer. So
Mm-hmm.
I looked at that and saw their success, and I said, I'm going to one up them, and I'm going to start C Spot Cuts. And C Spot Cut, we have been working in a remote capacity since 2012. We've never once had
Wow.
physical office space. And it's very much a situation where I saw these
Wow.
people getting this business to come through without the clients, but they still have the overhead of the expensive machines and the rent and everything that goes along with that business model. I cut out those things from my business model to be able to offer essentially a leaner service to my clients, and we were all working remotely. Like the internet and technology by 2012 caught up with the fact that we didn't need to be in one place any longer.
Yeah, I mean, especially in New York, where the rents were insane for businesses. Ordering the sushi for lunch cost 10 times as much as it did in another city. That's very cool that you were so ahead of the curve on that. And I'm sure it allowed you just to offer them a much more reasonable rate and faster service, right? I mean, because there was none of the nonsense.
Well, that's part of what I mentioned, but you have to also understand at the time it was still a little bit of a faux pas to be working in this fashion. Like I have to tell you,
Okay.
there was one project that I was editing where a producer showed up at my apartment, and I said, just so you know, this is how we're working. I'm sorry if that wasn't made clear. You're welcome to hang out on my
Yeah.
couch if you'd like, but this is how the work is done. And I mean, that only happened once, so it wasn't a particularly big deal, but it was still a little bit of a faux pas. So there was a lot of smoke and mirrors that went along with it. So
Right.
I still, I had I rented an office space, if you will, from what was the name of it? One of these like office places where I would have an address and like a mailbox in New York. So I
Right.
remember it was on 7th Avenue. I used to be able to have my messengers and whatnot. If I needed to drive, it would go to the office. There would be a receptionist. I would run down on the subway, grab the drive, head back to the apartment, and
It
do
was
what I
like
had to
you were
do.
creating WeWork, basically,
That's
at that point.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
And
so
I mean,
interesting.
it was a lot of fun, and I was able to do it with folks who I then had relationships in the business who I trusted. Honestly, it's C Spot Cut. We've, for better or for worse, never really worked with an intern, and the amount of times that I've worked with somebody who I haven't worked with before, I could probably count on my hands. So that there's definitely, that cuts out a whole talent pool who unfortunately I haven't had a chance to work with. But it also, by working in that fashion, it allowed me to trust my people to do what they had to do. So I didn't have to worry about micromanaging from hundreds of
Right.
miles away, because I really, the team of folks who I worked with was not only local to New York City or even the tri-state area. I had some folks in LA and some people all around just doing some projects, and it was just so nice to Dropbox or what have you, sharing media, sending a hard drive if necessary, and having the people there that you could trust to perform what they're there to do.
So, what kind of stuff do you guys do there? I know that, you said you still are beholden to the client at the end of the day. What kind of clients do you have at C Spot Cut?
Sure. Well, we've honestly seen our client base shift dramatically in the past 3 or 4 years. They were When we started, we were very much a cable promotion production company. It was very much the, watch this show tonight at 8 o'clock type of promo. And we were doing a ton of that business for almost every network that's, has New York footing. So a lot of the Viacom networks and things along those
Mm-hmm.
lines. That business model, unfortunately, has just been flipped on its head from their standpoint. The networks are not doing business the same way, so we are simply not getting that same kind of business. So I've been trying to reposition us as more of like a content company, and we could produce content for, whatever medium it may be. So one of our larger clients now is Sotheby's. We just did a big series of videos for, a digital auctions that they were doing, and we gave the backstories on
Oh.
the digital artists and things like that. So it's really taking the production skills and the post skills and just trying to go after new business at this point, and in different areas that are not necessarily beholden to the cable networks, or honestly anything entertainment related, because that world is just in so much turmoil the past few years that it's more interesting, and there's more opportunities I see going direct to brands and doing their web content and things along those lines. So that's where C Spot Cut plays these days.
Well, and I'm sure you're meeting clients like Mike Pecorello mentioned this during his interview, that he works with people who grew up watching the shows that you edited, are now old enough to have jobs. and does your prior work ever come up? Do they figure out like, wait, you edited Yu-Gi-Oh? You were the guy who did Sonic X? Like, does that come up ever, or is it
Well,
secret?
it's only really come up a handful of times. For a very long period of time, Nickelodeon and all their subsequent brands were very large clients of ours, and we did stuff for
Okay.
Nicktoons and T-Nick and all this. And we wound up doing, a handful of campaigns that were Yu-Gi-Oh related, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or other things that I had worked on previously at 4Kids was being
Mm-hmm.
re-shown on Nickelodeon. So we did a lot of repackaging of content for them and stuff like that. So they brought me in as a freelancer to work on one really fun project. They had released a so-called series called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Lost Episodes. And they brought me in to work on the launch trailer for this. And it was essentially some episodes that they had in the can that just didn't get released for whatever reason. So they were releasing, it was a relatively big deal when they had the networks, and Turtles was one of their, big selling points and flagships. So they brought me in to work on they deemed it a trailer, but they didn't really know what they wanted. And I really kind of went over the top with this thing. And I made a full 2-minute movie trailer of this 13 episode story arc called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Lost Episodes. And it's still one of my favorite edits that I've done in my 20-year plus career. And it was really a lot of fun. And we really, tried to make it this big, epic thing. And I remember the first time that I shared it with the creative director at the time, and he again didn't really know what to expect walking in, and it was very much one of these, okay, that's good, let's just do that then. And we just kind of ran with it. And I was then able to carry, that trailer over to a handful of the episodic spots towards the end of the series. But it was this big orchestral music track, and we really amped up the drama and the tension. So that was a fun one that we worked on.
We talk a lot about the in-house music team. Were you able to utilize them and their amazing skill for that kind of stuff?
Well, for the promos, what we mainly used was music libraries. So I remember Extreme Music had this great promo library and this great scores, and then I was able to really again bring in this really like just fun orchestral piece. I really played with the sound design from the episodes. There was a lot of like swishes of swords and things like that. We got to bring in Scott Rayo to do the voiceover, and he just totally nailed it, that like big deep voice that he has. And the audio mix kind of went over the top, so it was just like one of these things that it just really felt like everything came together like really well. You guys should check it out, it's awesome.
Well, where is it? That's what I was just going to ask you. Where is that? Do you have it, or is it online somewhere?
I've only seen it like there's some links of it on YouTube. I mean, I personally have it on like my Vimeo account somewhere. I can send you guys a link if you want, but
Yeah, please do, because when this airs, we'll put that up there. That's really cool.
oh, there you go. Yeah, I can definitely pull that together for you. So that was a fun one. Since then, it's more of just by happenstance, if anything gets brought up like that. You can't see my background in my office, but I have a lot of these souvenirs and whatnot. So if anybody is walking around the house, it
Oh,
always sparks an interesting conversation.
okay. Now I can't see it. Tell us what some of the cool stuff you have is, because we're so few of us kept the really good stuff from that time because we didn't know we'd want it necessarily.
Or how much it would be worth.
Yes. Oh, well, especially that. Oh my God, I would have kept my toys in much better condition.
The
Yeah.
only thing that I have that is really cool, that is, I imagine, very limited number, was they gave out these jackets that was the first or second season of Yu-Gi-Oh! That says Yu-Gi-Oh! Production Crew. It's very nice.
Wait a second, you have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Crew jacket?
It's super cool.
The actors did not get that jacket.
Uh-oh.
Now I'm mad. Wait, that's pretty cool. Because I was going to say, I got rid of my Pokemon jacket, which was the only thing 4Kids ever gave me. And I was like, I thought it was so cool at the time. And then years later, I was bitter and I was like, take it to Goodwill, Mom. I was like, I get no residuals for this. Take it to Goodwill.
Right.
I'm so glad you have that jacket. That is cool.
Yeah, everything else, I mean, unfortunately, I don't have any of the cards or anything at this point. But, I mean, this is just stuff that I wound up picking up myself. I'm, kind of get my nerd out in here.
Yeah. I mean, I did at the time buy a bunch of like Pokemon stuff and whatever I could find, and it is in a box somewhere that hopefully I don't know.
Hopefully
I don't think I'm going to retire off of it, but thank you so much for talking to us. That was really, really insightful, and I love hearing about the successes people have had since then. I almost want to call this show 4Kids Alumni because people have gone on to do such interesting things. Especially again because it was such a young office, and I think it's people like you who weren't there didn't stay for 20 years, went and did these interesting things afterwards that it's fun to hear about and talk about. And now someone can hire you to do this stuff and be like, yeah, I worked with the guy who edited Yu-Gi-Oh! So now that's going to be how they're going to find you.
I still have relationships with a lot of the folks who were 20 years in now, because now they're with Konami. So I still am friendly with some of these folks. And there's part of me that looks back and says, holy cow, how did you do this and stay there for 20 years? And there's the flip side of me that honestly is very jealous of the fact that they've been with these same cool people and, gainfully employed for 20 years. And it's certainly something to be said about that, particularly the period of freelancing, or even how the business has been the last few years, that they've had this reliable group of folks. I mean, I think it's great. And you guys mentioned Mike Pecorello earlier. He left 4Kids before I did. And at the time when he left, he went to Nickelodeon. He was very much my door into Nickelodeon. And it was very much a situation where, he had a pretty nice position at the time. He said, hey, do me a favor, give this guy a shot. They gave me a shot, and then I was able to take the ball and run with it. But it is, for better or for worse, like a running gag with me and my wife, that I wish I had 10 more Mike Pecorellos, because the folks like
we all do.
I mean, listen, he's a fantastic fella, but the relationships open the doors, and that's probably the one flip side that I've had a little bit with the way C-Spot Cut is run. Is, I would always make it a point to try and get coffees and whatnot with my clients or meet new people, but particularly since COVID, when there really is so little interaction, doing like practicing new business initiatives and trying to do sales at this point is incredibly hard. So I find, again, this Sotheby's relationship is just another person who I built a relationship 15, 20 years ago. I wish I had 10 of her as well. Like, those are the most important relationships that you have. Like, they've made it in the trenches, and you're the cool guy that, you're probably going to be in the trenches again. You don't want the guy who's going to be a jerk. You want the guy who's going to jump on the grenade.
Totally. And I mean, I think, again, this is not a businessy podcast, but I think that's a great takeaway for anybody who's listening to this, trying to work in this industry. And the cliche of be nice to everybody, you don't know where they're going to end up. I mean, you should be nice to everyone anyway. Don't be a douchebag. But again, if it's your strategy, be nice to everyone.
It can't hurt. It can never hurt.
It can't hurt. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You guys, the website, if you do want to check out Jordan's work, is cspotcut.tv. Definitely check out his work. And really so great to talk to you and hear about your time there.
Thank you. And this was a lot of fun.
Here's the interesting question, because, again, we're finding this stuff out. There's all this lost media from that time. Do you have any of it hiding in your apartment?
No, fortunately not. Nope, just the stuff that I've been reintroduced to here.
Just the jacket. So, like, just the Yu-Gi-Oh jacket. Guys, do not break into his home. Maybe he'll put the jacket on eBay, but don't do it for that. But there's no lost content there that you're going to find. Yeah, but thank you again, and hopefully we'll get to work together again at some point.
That would be fantastic. Thank you both. This was a lot of fun.
So, that was really interesting. I have a question, though. Why do people blur out their Zoom backgrounds? I wanted to see all his cool stuff behind him, but so many people blur out their Zoom backgrounds.
Some dignity? I don't know. It's like...
No, but like, I get it if you, there are definitely some people if they're working in their kitchen or whatever, but he was sitting in front of, he mentioned sitting in front of, so now I just want to know what was blurred out.
Yeah, they're always a conversation starter. I've learned over the years. It's like, oh, what do you got in there? And it almost feels
what's back there?
Invasive.
Well, okay, so I can see Steve's Zoom background, and there's definitely a lot of toys and stuff.
Well, the worst part is I have a mirror,
so I can see the back of your head.
Yeah, now that I'm doing more recording during the daytime, it's way more obvious that I could see.
Yeah, I can see your toiletries. I can see. I like being able to see.
I was doing a little bit of cleaning. Okay, so it's
no, it doesn't. It's not messy. It's not. No. I don't.
I want to put a curtain.
My God.
I want to put a curtain there. Kind of Japanese style.
Yeah, shoji screen. Just get a 3-sided shoji screen. That's actually not a bad idea.
Like
just because I feel like it. Well, I like looking at all your toys and stuff, but I feel like
that's not all of them.
Steve, believe me, I figured.
Yeah.
But figure, because there's a lot of figures. Oh, look at that pun I didn't even mean to make. But I do feel like I'm in, full disclosure too, I'm in my booth, but my booth is part of a closet. But the less I can see of my closet, the more professional I feel. Like I know that sounds silly, but like people ask me like, how do you get into character and things like that? And I'm like, putting on the headphones, and as silly as that sounds, my closet, but like putting on headphones or something that like switches you into work mode, I think does help. So like, I think if you had a shoji screen or something behind you, it might feel like I'm in my office now. Cool. Or
I don't do a whole lot of like on-camera stuff too, so I never really cared because I know like there's a whole thing. It's like, oh, if you're gonna be on video, I got to make sure you're framed just right. I mostly do podcasts, so I never have to worry about that. But we have our cameras on for the sake of it makes the conversation easier.
I'm gonna release all of the images of you though, just one day when you least expect it. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, some people, if you've caught some One Piece podcast live streams in the past, you've seen it. But,
so it's out there. All right, fine.
No, it was funny. It reminded me, you talking about getting like in that professional headspace. It reminded me of like early on in my quarantine, which God, like as of now is like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought about that at some point during this interview, and I'm like, geez, did I really get sent home 4 years ago?
Isn't that crazy?
But I remember thought like I should still get like fully dressed every day, so I'm in a work mindset, And that went away.
That lasted a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's a great segue, Steve, because I think the most interesting thing to me was that Jordan has been doing this remote work since 2012, which was really ahead of the game for that kind of stuff. So interesting. I suppose it's not surprising from a guy who graduated college at 19 and invented a way to create a more accurate lip flap. So very cool that he had that figured out back then, and then really didn't have to make any shift during the pandemic or once things changed. Very, very cool.
It's funny how like you would I don't this feels like casting judgment, but we didn't know for sure how some of the people that worked in like editing positions and engineering, all that, like we wouldn't know how much we could get out of them. And I think they're some of the most like, dense interviews we've had so far. They have so much to say.
Absolutely.
And,
I mean,
Jordan's no exception.
Totally. I think I was concerned because people were like, well, you're going to interview all the actors, right? And I'm like, well, no, I want to interview the other people, but you also don't know if they're loquacious, if they're, did I say that right? Did I pronounce loquacious right?
Probably. I don't know. Impress me.
Yeah. if they're talkative, if, the actors we know are outgoing and can talk, and the behind the scenes people that we've spoken to have been awesome. And Jordan is on that list and just really insightful and great, but also so personable. And I feel like I'm using words wrong today, but maybe that's just my own insecurity. But great, really great people. And like I said at the beginning, really regret not knowing these people better during my time working there, because what a fun office that probably was, despite listen, full disclosure, and not necessarily during this interview, but a lot of like the real dirt comes out after the interview, and they're like, well, I wasn't going to say this, but here's the crap about working there. Like, people are not necessarily, and it none of it is about the shows themselves. It's more about like work conditions or things like this, and truly things that happen at every single company, because no place is perfect. But some of the funnier stuff does come up after we stop recording. So I'm not sure why I said that, but I also don't want to paint a picture of it being this perfect work environment. But I will say that the people there were awesome. Like, there were so many young, creative people working in this one space. And especially when they expanded and had all these artists come in who were doing Turtles and things like, and the original programming, really a cool place and a really cool moment in time. So the 4Kids alumni are pretty awesome.
That's our subtitle.
That's our subtitle, 4Kids alumni. Yeah. Well, on that note, I suppose we should wrap this up. But thank you again to Jordan. I do hope I get to do some projects with him. What should we tell the good folks who have listened for this long?
Well, if you enjoyed this show, and this happens to be your first show, and even if it's not your first show, you're going to hear the same old anyway, just as a reminder, friendly reminder.
But don't fast forward through this or stop listening now, because you never know. Sometimes we think of something brilliant after we tell you all the same stuff we tell you.
Yeah. There might be a great little quip.
Like after we say go to 4kidsflashback, the number 4.com, like after we say that, or after we say go to patreon.com/4kidsflashback, or hey, you can buy merch from our website, just click the shop link, or after we say follow us on social media,
give us a nice review.
Oh yes, give us a nice review. We know who you are if you didn't. And no, I shouldn't threaten people. That's terrible. Tara, don't threaten these nice people. Follow us on social media, leave reviews for the show, all that typical stuff that podcasts say.
And wasn't that unique? Wasn't that different?
That was so unique.
I'm glad you stuck around.
Thank you for listening, Baba Booey, and
we'll catch you next time.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. For podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends, or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to Maji, MAJI.media. Thanks for listening.